One of the quietest injuries after abuse is not fear, it's not grief, and it's not even longing. It's the shame of still feeling affected, the quiet that nobody warns you about. But there is language for your trauma, your triggers, and your healing. There's almost nothing said about the moment you realize you're doing better, but still not free, about the confusion of the progress that doesn't feel complete, the embarrassment of carrying reactions you thought would disappear once you understood them. And you don't talk about it because you think you should be past this by now. You left, you know what happened, you learned the language, you've done the work, and yet something still hits you sideways. A reaction, a body response, a memory that lands heavier than it should. Not catastrophic, but just enough to knock the air out of your chest for half a second, enough to make you hesitate, enough to remind you that something inside you remembers even when your mind doesn't want to, and that shame comes fast. It's faster than curiosity, than compassion, and logic. It doesn't ask what happened, it tells you what it means. It turns nervous system responses into a character flaw, survival memory into a personal failure. You tell yourself you're weak for still feeling this way. You wonder if you're broken. You compare your insides to how well you're functioning on the outside. And you decide that something must be wrong with you. You look at the life you've rebuilt, the strength you've demonstrated, the awareness that you carry now, and instead of letting those things coexist with the reality of your body, you use them as evidence against yourself, as proof that if healing was real, it still wouldn't be here. This episode is not here to reassure you. It's here to tell you the truth, because reinsurance keeps the shame intact. Reassurance still treats your reactions like something that needs to be explained away. The truth does not soften, it cuts cleaner. You're not ashamed because you're failing at healing. You are ashamed because abuse trained you to believe recovery has a deadline. It trained you to believe that once you left, you're supposed to be done. That insight could override biology. That awareness should erase conditioning. That time alone should dissolve what repetition carved into your nervous system. Abuse didn't just hurt you, it educated you. It taught you that being affected was dangerous. That responses had consequences, that needing time, space, or gentleness made you a problem. So now, when something still touches you, that reflex is not curiosity, it's a self-attack. That shame isn't proof that you are stuck, it's proof of how thoroughly you adapted to survive. And until that truth lands, you will keep misreading your own healing as failure instead of what it actually is, incomplete conditioning unwinding at a human pace, not a performative one. I'm Megan Webster, I'm an abuse recovery coach, a trauma-informed strategist, and the woman a narcissist hopes to never meet twice. This is the Narcissist Worst Nightmare podcast for the women who have left, are leaving, or are living in the aftermath, trying to understand why their body hasn't caught up to their decisions yet. Today we are talking about the shame of still being affected, why women are embarrassed about not being over it yet, why abuse conditions emotional timelines, and how shame actually slows healing down more than trauma itself. Shame after abuse is not an emotional accident. It is the internal continuation of the external system that once punished you for having impact. It didn't come from being sensitive, dramatic, or broken. It came from being repeatedly taught that your emotional responses created problems instead of revealing truth. Inside of abusive relationships, your nervous system learned a very specific rule. Expression equals consequence. Feeling too much led to dismissal. Speaking up led to escalation. Needing support led to withdrawal. Over time, your body stopped asking what was true and started asking what was tolerable. That is how your shame got installed, not as a belief, but as a protective mechanism. So when you are still affected after leaving, the system doesn't orient toward care, it orients towards correction. The question is not what happened to me, it's why am I still like this? That question sounds internal, but it isn't. It's the echo of the dynamic that trained you to monitor yourself instead of being with yourself. Shame is not self-awareness. It is surveillance turned inward. The cruelest part is that shame usually shows up when the danger is gone. When the relationship ends and the body finally has room to feel, the old rules rush to clamp it down. Feelings surface and shame immediately follows to contain them. That is not a coincidence. That is your conditioning trying to maintain control without the original controller present. You are not ashamed because you are weak. You are ashamed because your system learned that having needs was unsafe. One of the most damaging expectations women carry after abuse is the belief that healing should be quick once understanding arrives. That clarity should shut the door. That insight should clean up the body's responses. And once you know better, you should feel better. That expectation is not wisdom. It's pressure dressed up as strength. Abuse collapses time inside the nervous system. The body learned to live in urgency, not continuity. It moved between anticipation, damage control, and recovery without fully settling. That means your system didn't process experiences as it happened. It stored them as memory. So when you leave, your body does not reset, it decompresses. Decompression looks like delayed emotion, grief, fear, anger. Not because you're regressing, but because the system finally believes it's allowed to feel without immediate threat. Expecting yourself to be over it is asking your body that spent years bracing for impact to suddenly trust stillness. That is not healing. That is coercion turned inward. Healing does not move in straight lines. It comes in waves of safety and activation. It moves when the body has had enough consistency to release what it once held. Shame enters the room when you confuse time with failure, when you interpret duration as weakness instead of depth, when you treat your nervous system like it owes you a timeline. It doesn't. Your body is not late. It is being thorough. High-functioning women can carry a particular kind of shame after abuse because competence becomes the evidence used against them. You're showing up, you're working, you're parenting, you're building a life. From the outside, you look stable. So when something still hits emotionally, that shame intensifies, not because the pain is worse, but because it feels unjustified. This creates a split inside of you. You become the woman who holds everything together while privately interrogating herself for needing support at all. You minimize your reactions because they didn't match the image you projected. You tell yourself you shouldn't still be affected and that other women had it worse. You also tell yourself things like, I'm being traumatic and I'm being too much. That internal dialogue doesn't come from perspective. It comes from your survival conditioning that rewarded functionality and punished vulnerability. The more capable you appear, the less permission you give yourself to be impacted. Shame thrives in that contradiction. It convinces you that because you're not falling apart, you don't deserve care. That because you're moving forward, you shouldn't look back. That because you're strong, you should be silent. This is how capable women end up isolated in their healing. The functioning becomes the mask that keeps the support you actually need away. A lot of people get confused by being affected is not the same thing as being trapped, but shame treats them as identical. Trauma does not live in your thoughts, it lives in your nervous system. And that means you can understand everything and still have reactions. You can know the relationship was harmful and still feel waves of grief. You can be safe and still flinch when something reminds your body of the past. This is not failure. It means your system is integrating an experience now that is no longer in survival mode. Integration is not quiet. It's messy, it's delayed, it can sometimes feel confusing, and it often looks like the reactions appearing later when the body finally believes it does not have to prioritize its own containment anymore. Shame will tell you that you are backsliding. Reality says this is processing. This is the difference between reliving trauma and releasing it. One keeps you stuck and the other moves you forward. Being affected is not the sign that the trauma won. It's a sign that your body finally feels safe enough to respond to it. Women do not just feel pain after abuse. They feel embarrassed by that pain, that something still hurts, that certain situations still activate them, and that their body reacts faster than their actual logic, so they hide it. They downplay how they're healing. They self-soothe in private. They manage themselves instead of letting anyone see what's happening. They perform recovery instead of allowing it. That embarrassment does not come from strength. It comes from conditioning that taught you your emotional reality was inconvenient. You were trained to survive quietly, to not make it a problem, to take up space with impact. Healing asks you to stop doing that, and that feels exposing at first. Not because you're unsafe, but because safety used to be conditional. Embarrassment of this is not proof that you are weak, it is proof you are trained to disappear emotionally. Sometimes shame pretends to be accountability, but its function is control, to keep you oriented towards compliance instead of your actual recovery. It tells you to get smaller, quieter, faster, cleaner. It rewards you for looking composed rather than being honest. It pressures you to regulate yourself into palatability instead of safety. Shame works by convincing you that your internal experience must be edited before it can be accepted. The belief did not originate inside you. It was trained through repeated consequences for emotional truth. Over time, your nervous system learned that survival depended on suppression, not expression. This is why shame feels urgent. It rushes you. It tightens your chest. It speeds up your thoughts. It pushes you towards self-correction before curiosity ever had the chance to enter. Shame does not ask what happened. It demands containment. That demand is not neutral. It is a reenactment from your past. When you shame yourself for still being affected, you create the same internal conditions that once required you to stay hypervigilant. Your body cannot distinguish between external authority silencing you and an internal one doing the same. This is why healing stalls when shame is present. The nervous system does not release stored survival energy in environments where it expects punishment. Shame teaches the body that feeling is still unsafe. Shame does not motivate growth, it reinforces self-abandonment. It keeps you focused on managing how you appear instead of metabolizing what you live through. It keeps you performing recovery instead of inhabiting it. And performance is not regulation, it is another layer of control. Until shame is identified as the problem, not the solution, the nervous system will continue to brace against itself. Shame only dissolves through normalization and nervous system safety, not your willpower. No amount of insight can override a system that expects consequence for honesty. The body releases shame when it experiences something different than what it was trained for. When expression is met with steadiness instead of withdrawal. When impact is allowed instead of corrected. When presence replaces evaluation. This is why being told things like be kinder to yourself rarely works. Kindness without safety still feels unsafe. The nervous system needs evidence, not encouragement. And that evidence comes through repeated experiences where nothing bad happens when you tell the truth. When you are not rushed out of an emotion. When you are not pressured to reframe, minimize, or move on. Where your experience is met without urgency. This is relational repair. The body learns safety in the presence of another regulated system. It learns that expression no longer leads to escalation. That being affected does not jeopardize connection. That it can feel without consequences attached. Inside the Reinvent, Rebuild, and Redeem membership, this is the shift that changes absolutely everything. Not because women are taught how to think differently, but because they are finally allowed to exist differently. There is a very specific moment many women experience where the shame response tries to activate and fails. The body prepares for self-policing, and instead it is met with steadiness. That moment teaches the nervous system more than years of analysis ever could. Shame loses power when it's no longer necessary for survival. When your system learns that you do not need to disappear to stay safe, shame no longer has a job. There is no version of you healing where rushing the nervous system produces peace. Pressure does not accelerate integration, it fractures it. Comparison does not motivate healing, it reinforces the belief that your experience is wrong. Timelines do not create safety, they create control. Your body heals in the order it feels safe enough to do so, not the order that looks impressive or makes sense to other people or matches a productivity mindset. Many women confuse moving forward with being healed. Forward motion can happen in survival. Healing requires slowing down long enough for the body to catch up. Still being affected is not evidence that something is wrong. It is evidence that something finally went right. The system, no longer bracing for impact, can now release what it once had to store. Listening to your body is not indulgent, it is corrective. The body does not need to be pushed into healing, it needs to be met. You are not late or behind or failing. You are exactly where your nervous system can begin to settle. If this episode stirred some discomfort, that's not a sign you are behind, it is a sign that something important is being named for you. Shame has convinced too many women that their pain makes them defective. The truth is simpler and harder to accept. You were impacted and there is residue. Healing does not require you to be over it. It requires you to stop turning on yourself for having been changed. If this episode cracks something open in you, good. That means you're waking up to the difference between healing and hiding. Share this with another woman who thinks she should be further along than she is. Hit follow so you don't miss the next one. And if you want grounded support where you rebuild without shaming your process, the Reinvent, Rebuild, and Redeem membership is open for you. This is going to be our focus for the month of January. You get immediate access to all past programs, our private Telegram community, and a group of women ready to welcome you in, and they are so committed to their healing from what's happened to them, and I know this is going to feel like home for you. We have 2 calls every single month, a focused coaching call and a social call where we do an activity together as a community. Last month, we made high-protein bagels together. You do not need to be over it in order to move forward. You need safety while your system catches up.